So good morning again, everybody. How was the dinner conversation, the garden conversation? Did you have fun? Yes. Good. That was the idea. Great. I have a couple of announcements before we start today. One relates to having fun also. Actually, both relate to having fun, but anyway. One is that remember that we are going to have the Good Practices Marketplace this afternoon, and there is still like some time if you want to present, if you want to do something. Just make sure that during the break you write your name and you explain the project that you would like to present in the Good Practice Marketplace. So that's one thing. The second thing is that in this wonderful building we have a facility in the basement where we can listen music, we can gather together. So if you wish at some point this night, just let you know that we can use this facility if we want to use it as a disco or to gather there a little bit. So after these two announcements, let's start. I hope you have full energy for a whole working day. Let's start with the first round of labs, and as you know, every round of labs will be kicked off with some presenters that will explain some ideas, will give some reflections from practice, from policy making and from research. And we start, I kindly ask Biljana to come to the front. Big applause to Biljana before she starts. Great. Biljana Vasilevska will explain us about the Enter project and some lessons that can be drawn from it, building resilience of young people in disadvantaged situations, how to overcome barriers to inclusion. Biljana, all yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Can I have that? Can I have the microphone? It will be easier for me. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ramon, for the introduction. As you heard, my name is Biljana. I am invited here to share with you one of the greatest experiences that I had in my life, and that is called the Enter project. Yesterday we heard a lot about the inequalities, and we heard what are we dealing with, what are the young people dealing with in the modern world. But what I really like now is the change of the focus from discussing of obstacles to actually discussing how we can overcome these obstacles and how we can make a world more equal place for the young people. So one of the practices that lead me to that was the Enter project. I am sure that in this room there are a lot of people that can tell you more about the Enter project from the perspective of the organizers and the people who actually implemented it. But I would like to share you the perspective of the participant in the Enter project. What was the Enter project all about? It was a project initiated by the youth sector of the Council of Europe in 2009, aiming at the development of youth policy and youth work responses to situations of exclusion, discrimination and violence affecting young people, particularly those living in multicultural disadvantaged neighborhoods. The project promoted young people's access to social rights as a means for their inclusion and participation in society. Furthermore, the concerns that the project responded to were the multidimensional social and economic imbalances which hinder young people in accessing social rights. The project includes support measures for youth work practices that enhance young people's participation and for youth policies that reflect the promotion of access to social rights. This all sounds very nice, but let's see what actually happened in Enter. Enter was a mixture of a lot of activities towards achieving the aim that I already mentioned. One of the greater pillars of Enter were the long-term training courses that were implemented. One was from 2009 till 2012, and the other one was 2013-2015. And the idea with these long-term training courses was actually to develop the competencies of youth workers or youth leaders to contribute to combating the social exclusion of young people in disadvantaged neighborhoods through the development of concrete projects. So, a lot of young people, youth workers, came many times to Strasbourg and Budapest, and then Strasbourg again and Budapest again, to learn how they can, in their local realities, implement high-quality projects that can actually support young people in their improvement of the access to social rights. So besides the fact that we learned a lot of things, we gained a lot of skills, we developed a lot of competencies, we also had a chance with the support of the European Youth Foundation to directly implement pilot projects within the duration of the Enter project that can actually tackle some of the challenges that young people are facing in different local realities that were in a way represented in the long-term training courses. The other greater pillar of the Enter project was actually, in my opinion, one of the greatest outcome of all was actually drafting the recommendations. You've heard about the Enter recommendations from the very beginning yesterday. And these are recommendations that actually were drafted by every participant in the Enter project. So everybody that was somehow included in Enter in different levels, in different activities, had her say in the policy recommendations and had a chance to actually say what the authorities need to do so to assure that young people don't face discrimination, violence, and exclusion, but they have easy access to their social rights. So the recommendations were adopted in 2015, a year ago, at the beginning of the year. And it's a call to the public authorities to actually design policies that address the needs of young people, with a particular focus on the needs of young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods. For doing that, the local authorities are invited to actually improve the access to education, health, housing, employment, sport, leisure, etc., information and counseling. And what is particularly important for the youth workers, one of the recommendations is to actually recognize the value of the youth work, recognize the value of non-formal education that is going on as a powerful tool that can actually help in improving the access to social rights of young people and making the world a more equal place for young people. Besides these recommendations, for which I'm sure you will find more about online, I can also share that there was one great educational tool produced during the Enter. It's called Enter Dignity Land game. And if you haven't played the game so far, I really encourage you to do it because it's really nice and entertaining way of learning about social rights with young people. After this, besides this, we also had a lot of meetings, thematic seminars, study sessions, international youth activities with relation to the theme that were covered by the Enter project, but we also didn't forget about the research. So during the Enter, in both phases, there was a research on youth work and youth policy aspects related to access to social rights for young people. At the end of each Enter, because Enter had 2 phases, at the end of each, we actually had a lot of young people that were involved in the local projects of the youth workers who were part of the long-term training courses. We get these young people to come to Strasbourg and to actually have their say and participate in the decision-making of the Council of Europe. So each of these young people were invited to share what are, in their belief, is the thing that the authorities should do in order to make their life better. So, what was I reminded of during Enter? The things that I was reminded of was that all animals are equal, yes, but some animals are more equal than others. Many young people in today's Europe live in situations where they experience exclusion, discrimination, and violence, unfortunately. In the transition to adulthood, young people experience situations of socio-economic vulnerability and of fragility in their place in society. Not a nice thing to be reminded of, huh? Then, what I became aware of is the value of youth work, the importance of adequate youth policy responses to challenges faced by young people, the need for thorough research, the value of non-formal education, and the power of cross-sectoral cooperation. At the end, what came out of Enter for me was the increase of the competences that I, as youth worker, should have in order to be able to support young people in their improvement of access to their social rights. I had my say in the decision-making process on national, local, and international level. I was a person that actually had a chance to get a lot of young people to give their suggestions when we drafted the recommendations on what the authorities needs to do. And one particular outcome for me from the Enter projects was actually creating a youth social rights network, which is a network from people that were in a way involved in all the Enter activities. And it's an open at this moment still informal, with a tendency to become a formal network of individuals, public and private entities working on improvement of access to social rights of young people. What is particularly interesting with this network, I'm sure there are a lot of similar examples in the world, is the thing that in this network members can be young people, youth workers, a different kind of practitioners working on improvement of access to social rights of young people, and also the local authorities, national authorities, public institutions, schools, health institutions, etc., etc. So everybody who is in a way interested on working on improvement to access to social rights of young people is welcomed in this youth social rights network. The network exists separately now from the Council of Europe, the youth department, but in our activities we have a lot of support from their side, because our focus is, as I said, the improvement of access to social rights of young people. Particularly the following years will be focused on how to make the policy recommendations implemented in practice. And what we really are happy about is the fact that also the Council of Europe, the Department of Youth, in this Enter 3 phase, is actually focusing on how to implement these policies into practice, how to go from policy into practice. And there is an open call online for participants in the seminar of the Enter 3 that will actually focus on that, how to get the policy into practice. You can read more about the Enter project on the website of the Council of Europe. You can go into details in each of the activities, see who was there, what happened, read the reports, see the video, follow the or pictures or whatever. And for now, I would just like to say thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions about the Enter project, I will be around to answer those that I can answer. But if I can't answer, you can visit the website. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Biljana. Okay, now instead of questions, we thought of doing something different. So what we propose you to do is, as you are sitting in semicircles, allow for 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes to do some bus groups. Some groups to discuss what we just heard from Biljana, how the Enter recommendation was born, the bottom-up approach, etc., and everything that she said. So please, can you now get into small groups for 4 or 5 minutes to discuss a little bit about this presentation? Thanks. Actually, it was a good idea. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for these discussions. Let's go, let's continue. Hello. Hi. Okay, good. I see it's a lively discussion. That's good. That's the idea. So, as today we are starting with the first round of labs, and our first round is on identity and finding a place in the community. Let's continue with presentations, and let me please invite Anisa Haghdadi, who will talk about creativity as a mobilizing factor and will give us some examples on young people experiences inequalities. Anisa, thanks a lot. The floor is yours.
Oh, I'm a bit smaller than the other speakers. Can everyone see me? Yeah? Okay. So you'll either be really happy or horrified to know that there's not lots of data in my presentation because I'm a practitioner, but I hope that you can take something from it. So my name's Anisa. I'm from Birmingham, as you can tell by my lovely, thick Brummie accent. And I'm very lucky that I get to run a youth engagement agency called Beat Freaks. So we help organisations to better understand and reach young people, whilst helping young people to develop their skills, their confidence and their networks. And we do that all through creativity, all through the power of creative arts. So it actually started in 2013 when I was 23 and still classed as a cool young person. And I was interested in two things. One, were there other young people like me who wanted to channel their creativity into something more positive that would make a better Birmingham? And two, how could we bridge the gap between young people and the institution? Because they weren't trusting institutions. How could we bring them together? So it actually started with a bit of an experiment. We took over a coffee shop in the evenings. During the day, it was full of lawyers and accountants. And in the evening, we took over it with political poetry. We're looking at some of these guiding principles. And I just want to draw your attention to number 5, that art is inextricable from change. When you make art or you experience art, you are being changed. So we were really interested in, could we bring people together and what would happen if we convened them? What would they talk about and what would they have to say? I'm glad to say that the experiment went well. We filled the coffee shop and we've been doing that ever since for the last 3 years, once a month. But actually, more than just giving a platform for young people to express themselves, organisations and institutions started to say, hang on a minute, you can engage the people that we've been talking about for such a long time. So now we get to support young, creative people to do what they love and to apply their creativity to affect personal and social change. So I'm just going to show you a very quick video. It's about 60 seconds. I hope you enjoy it. So that's a little bit of a flavour of our work. We work across community, school and social settings, putting on workshops, events, projects and programmes that get young people to really unleash their creativity. And you saw a glimpse of that with Amira's opening poem yesterday. I just want to give you an insight into my city. So we're a hugely diverse city. We're about to tip over to be an ethnic majority in the city. We're actually the youngest in Europe with the majority 40%, well, coming up to a majority of being under 25. But we also have a lot of issues with large amounts of child poverty and mental health issues between young people and mental health. As you can see there, that Birmingham City Council very kindly cut the unkindly cut the mental health budget by 94% in the last couple of years. And we have very high unemployment, but on a positive side, we have lots of talent and we have lots of amazing young people. So I want to tell you a little bit about our work and the principles of our work by telling you, oh, Alia's disappeared, there was another face down there, by telling you a few stories. So this is Soraya in the top left corner. She's a spoken word artist. She actually has a hidden disability which prevents her from being able to work for a very long period of time, but she's incredibly talented. We actually have Amira, who you met yesterday, who joined our programme as a young person, interested in poetry, but not really quite knowing what to do with it and how to turn it into a sustainable career. She now travels the world, or we travel the world together, getting to do amazing things like this. Chantel had severe mental health issues. In our first session, she actually cried and left the session because she couldn't take being in a room full of new people. She's now performed on national radio, she's touring, you know, she's doing absolutely amazing things with her work. So we don't have one linear program. We believe that complex problems need complex solutions. So we've designed a web of interventions that allow young people to have agency and autonomy to really interact and navigate our opportunities. But we also give them a kick up the bum when they need it. So we call this a pick-and-mix non-linear creative education, and you can see a little bit of our methodology there, that we involve young people and embed them right from designing the proposition through to implementation, right the way through to reflecting through arts and play. We create safe spaces for young people to explore their evolving identity, to look at things like their sexuality, their political alliances, their political frustrations, but also to reflect and reframe their own personal story so that they can create a narrative about who they are. And this is actually the experiment that I mentioned. This is Poetry Jam. This is really important because we then create a peer network that's based on passions and not coincidence. And what I mean by that is if you've grown up in an area where your friends are doing things that you maybe don't want to carry on with, or you've gone to a school that you don't really want to associate with anymore, it's really important that you can create a support network that's aspirational, that everybody can kind of rise together. But also we offer spaces for these people to critique and to celebrate each other, which builds resilience and self-esteem. We're supporting young people to navigate their pathways, but also we're trying to model alternative careers. So Alia, whose face didn't show up, actually couldn't go to university in the UK because she couldn't take UK finance because it's haram in her religion to take debt. So we've supported her to find new ways to do what she wanted to do, which was to look at the decolonisation of structures and black empowerment, and she's doing that by running her own projects and her own events now. I want to quickly introduce you to the concept of fair trade data. Lots of policymakers, lots of project coordinators, lots of researchers always want to know what young people think, but they do it in a really, really boring way. We think that this needs to change. If you want to canvass young people's opinion and extract really informative insight, you have to do that in a fun way. So we've been looking at what young people think about Brexit and a potential leave from the EU referendum. We've done that by designing a data rave, by giving them a fun space that they can give us that opinion in a safe way, and we reward them for that by giving them fun places to do that. We're also investing in young people's credibility and legitimacy. So we've convened a group of organisations in Birmingham to create this Powered by Birmingham scheme where young people can actually say, okay, well, my school wasn't the best for my CV, but actually I'm being backed by some of the major institutions in Birmingham who believe in me. This is really, really important because it underwrites the quality of what they're wanting to do. In everything that we do through arts, we're always looking at developing transferable skills, and we do that through our create values. We think it's really important that young people develop these skills, not just for work, but so that they can thrive in their lives as well. Sustainability is one of our key principles. The most frustrating thing is when a project ends because the funding's run out. And what happens to those young people? What happens when the boxes have been ticked, but they're not ready to move on? So we believe that working with a range of partners and institutions and agencies to diversify the risk helps to benefit the young people, it helps to give value to the organisation that's actually paid us to do the work, and it sustains Beat Freaks as a sustainable entity. So I've mentioned a little bit that all of our work is co-created and youth-led. Young people are at the centre of our design, our implementation and our reflection. And we've borrowed some principles called the human-centred design principles from IDEO, which I suggest you look up, to turn into youth-centric design. And the last concept, which really for me encapsulates everything that I've rambled on about, is artivism. Everything we do is art activism, through and through. We're developing play with purpose, with passion. So I just want to leave you on a few provocations. I want to ask, how can you move into a platform approach? How can you stop creating stuff and projects and programs and actually redefine that and make places and platforms where you can build networks for young people to for their creativity to flourish? But also, how can we get better at measuring the social value of arts and creativity? Arts isn't just about entertainment, it changes and saves lives. How can we get better at supporting those facing multiple disadvantage or inequality by addressing their needs as interdependent? So how can we have more holistic programs that don't just tackle employment or just tackle human rights, but brings everything together? And finally, in the UK, we talk a lot about tolerance, and it really grinds my gears because tolerance sounds like we'll make do. It's all right, we'll put up with it. But how can we move to more integrated and collaborative communities? When a young person is no longer a young person, they need to be able to function as an adult in that community. So my provocational thing that I'd like to leave you on is, how can you help young people to help themselves? And I want to leave you on a Benjamin Franklin quote. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I might remember, involve me and I learn. Please be involving young people in as many of these conversations as you can. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for provoking us. Actually, thanks a lot for sharing this inspirational project. And let's allow again 3-4 minutes to discuss a little bit on this project that I'm sure is going to be around on our heads for the rest of the day. Thank you for your conversation. Let's go back, please. Hello. Hello. Can we please come back? Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this. So we are going with our last two presentations before we go to the coffee break and we start with getting split into labs. And I kindly invite Kateryna Shalayeva to talk about gender inequalities. Thank you, Kateryna.
Good morning. Good morning. I don't know. Do you hear me well? Yeah, okay. So this presentation is about gender inequalities. And I try to be less academic and more, what's this? Participative, non-formal. But I start with the question, who thinks that we still have problems with gender inequalities in Europe? Could you raise your hands? No peer pressure, no peer pressure. Okay, thank you. Who thinks that we still have problems with girls' and women's empowerment in Europe? Girls' and women's empowerment. Right, thank you. Who thinks that we still have problems with gender equity in Europe? Okay. And who thinks we have problems with men's empowerment in Europe? Men's empowerment. Right. Thank you. No peer pressure. And who answered yes to all 4 questions? Who answered yes to all 4 questions? Okay. Well, don't feel pressure and don't think, oh, what is this gender equality versus gender equity and girls' empowerment versus boys' empowerment and so on. You are not the only one who mixed up all those terms. There is really not a lot of clarity. But just to say that this is a difficult topic. So the purpose of my research, which is still ongoing, was mainly to highlight what are the lessons learned and what are the gaps in youth policy, youth work, and youth research in terms of gender equity, gender equality, girls and women's empowerment, boys and men's empowerment. And I have to say it was a difficult task because this might be not a very attractive topic anymore because, however, very many Europeans do believe that we still have problems, theoretically speaking. When it comes to practical terms, there is a less tendency to introduce mechanisms which would address those problems. Have a look. I apologize, most statistics would refer to the European Union rather to the Council of Europe member states. This is also one of the elements on collecting evidences. We have everything we need to illustrate more or less what are the tendencies in the European Union, but then in terms of the Council of Europe, there is no system, like a general system for collecting data. So have a look. This is the EU Gender Equality Index. And you might see that overall in the European Union, 28 member states, we're only 52% gender equal. And, would it work?
I will change you the mic.
Is that working? You will see that we are mainly equal in health, 90%. So this is more or less done. There are just some slight difficulties, but it's all right. And then you would see that our main difficulty is here It's on time. Okay, what is time? Time, and the picture says, can I call you back in 5 years? And this is the mother with little kids. And this is what about time. And this is our hugest problem. So women do engage more, and they lose a lot of opportunities because they engage more in child breeding. So you see that women are more likely than men to say that gender equality are widespread. However, the tendency is quite high, so we do recognize that we still have problems. And what is? Okay, I'm sorry. This is also out of order. And at the same time, 50% of Europeans would tell you that the family life would suffer if a woman works full time. So on one hand, we recognize we have a problem. On another side, we'll say, oh, wait, what is going to happen if a woman works full time? And women somehow even have a slight tendency to say, yes, this is a bigger problem than men. Men are a little bit more relaxed on this, seeing their wives working over their family partners working full time. And this is why women represent 75% of all people who work part-time. Employment. Here we have exactly the same thing. This all starts because once upon a time, a woman gets children, and this is exactly where the whole problem starts. When we look at the statistics and we see the young girls, the school girls, the girls in higher education, we all know women have higher education. Women are more educated, higher educated in Europe, but somehow when they graduate and they go to the job market, this is where the problem starts. We're speaking about the pay gap. And we know that in private sector, the pay gap is even higher than in public sector, for obvious reasons. There is only one country in the European Union where the pay gap is positive for women. This is Belgium, and this is in the public sector in Belgium, plus 3%. Otherwise, the pay gap exists all across the sector, be it public or private, in all member states. As you see, as I said, women are more educated, but they are not getting to the upper positions. So they are held somewhere in the middle management. And the female unemployment is higher than the male unemployment. And when it goes to the attitudes, we also see that somehow women are less inclined to be elaborative on working on their employment issues. So 47% of young men and only 39% of young women would choose for setting up their own business. And we shouldn't be surprised. Look at the orientations of young graduates, and you would see that, once again, men are more confident than young women. So no surprise that we have a pay gap. No surprise that we have a gender ceiling, because from the very beginning, we have differences in expectations, differences in attitudes, differences in professional ambitions. This is very much about the youth sector. Look, we wish to promote mobility, but somehow we have barriers to this, which we are probably not aware of. This is very general statistics, but it still shows some tendencies. So the younger the person is, the more this person tends to go abroad. Why so? Because this person is free from obligations, right? The older the person goes, you see the difference between 63% 15, 19 years old and 42% 30, 35 years old. So the older the person is, the less person is inclined to go abroad for whatever reasons, study, non-formal education, just short-term visits. And women tend to choose for shorter stays. And the reason for that being family. this is still very diverse. We don't have the exact details. We have more general tendencies, and we need more research on this. But one of the arguments is that young women feel they need to take care of the families, being it their parents or their own families, and therefore this is the reason for them of not thinking they could go abroad, and certainly not for longer periods. There's some statistic from the Erasmus mobility, and you see that when it comes to students, there are more female students than male students go, but then it comes to teachers or professors, then it's certainly more male who go. It is on one hand because we have more male professors, but this is also because we are getting to the upper age group, and there we have barriers to mobility. And also interesting on learning, when we ask young women what did they learn when they traveled, most young women, the highest rank, they would say we learned languages, while men would say, oh, we've learned professional skills. On gender roles. And the picture says, as God promised men that good and obedient wives would be found in all corners of the world, then he made the earth round and loved and loved and loved. But what I go show you next is not that funny. Okay, this was a little joke, but about good and obedient wives, this is really not funny. 75% of women in middle and senior management declare they have suffered from sexual harassment. This is in Europe. This is today. Every third European woman has been a victim of violence, be it physical or sexual, at least once in her lifetime. And every fifth European woman has been a victim of sexual violence. Right? In our environment, we wouldn't think so, most probably. But this is a general tendency in Europe, and there is not much difference between, let's say, the richer and the less richer member states. This is a general tendency. And think about the impact it has on children, because we don't have exact statistics on domestic violence against children, but drawing from the statistics on gender violence against women, we can assume that the statistics is more or less similar. And think about the domestic violence in closed communities, such as migrants, such as ethnic minorities, such as women with disabilities. We also don't have exact statistics. We can only make assumptions, and we need more research. Okay, I'm nearly there. We obviously won't advance if we don't empower men. And the picture says he can do it. He can do it, obviously, but strangely enough, when we go to the public opinion polls, it tells us that nearly 50% of Europeans still question if men are able to be equal partners at home, equally participate in childcare and domestic work and so on. And this is one of the reasons to the destructive behavior for men. We all know that if we take statistics on suicide, on drug and alcohol abuse, on crimes and violence, these are the social diseases of man. And one of the things is because we have probably not taken care of men enough when we are talking about gender equality. My last point on this is about cultures. How inclusive are cultures? Do you know who this girl is? No. She's an Australian young woman called Stephanie Goodlove, and she is the first ballerina dancer in hijab. And she faces very strong resistance from the environment, from her environment, because a woman is not supposed to dance a ballet dance in hijab. And I'm putting this here because very often we somehow feel to define someone's gender role, how that person should look, how that person should behave. And when we talk about inclusions and access and barriers and things like that, we need to remember that this is very diverse. Now, I have to say that the collection of evidences is still continuous. We have access to statistics, but somehow we have difficulty to collect evidences from youth work. So if you know that your national agency or your youth organization or youth center has a good example, a good practice, don't hesitate to contact me, and I will include it in my paper, which will be published quite soon, I believe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kateryna. Oh, yeah, this microphone is working better. Thanks a lot, Kateryna, for this insight on gender inequalities and actually for letting us see how serious it is, which is not a joke. So let's allow again 3-4 minutes to discuss a little bit, to kick the conversation on these insights. And well, let's do it for 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes. Thank you. Hello? Hello? Here? Let's continue. Let's continue with the last of our presentations. Yeah, Gerhard, you can come to the front. Hello, guys. Let's please continue. Who was the person whistling the last time? He or she was very helpful. Okay, great. Thank you. With this microphone, it's a bit easier because it's louder. So thank you. Let's go with the last of our presentations before we head to the splitting into groups for the labs. And it's my pleasure. I have here Gerhard Mosshammer, who will be talking about addressing extremism against refugees. Thanks a lot, Gerhard.
Wait a minute. How to put the... Hello, my name is Gerhard Mosshammer. I'm director of the Austrian NGO Interkulturelles Zentrum, Intercultural Center. And since the year 2007, we are also agency for the Youth in Action program, respective the Erasmus Plus Youth in Action program. When I was very excited to come here to this symposium Unequal Europe, and in the preparation I thought, which hat will I put on? Because we are an NGO and doing a lot of NGO stuff, but we are also agency for the Youth in Action program. And I don't know if these are the wrong expectations here, but I actually decided to put a little bit more the Youth in Action hat on. To just tell you a bit about the NGO Intercultural Center, we were founded 30 years ago. Intercultural Center, that means we are dealing with interculture. We don't like our name anymore, but we cannot change it because it's another concept now. Interculture, we cannot call us diversity center now or whatever. But we are dealing with questions of non-formal and non-formal education. And actually what we want to do is to bring different people from different parts of the world together and let them talk to each other. That's always what I say in a very simple way. So I put out of peer pressure yesterday to put a PowerPoint presentation because I'm very bad in PowerPoint presentations, and I thought everyone has one, and then this youth agency guy comes and does have not one, so I put one there. And I want actually to tell you a bit more about what is going on in the world of the Youth in Action youth agencies and how do they go about the topic of inclusion. So since I am working with this program Youth in Action, and I wanted to, because you never know who is sitting there. Everyone who knows here in the audience the Erasmus Plus program. So I thought so everyone, most of you know the program itself. Whoever participated, who was a participant in a project, also many people. Whoever of you wrote the project for also many people. Whoever, when he wrote the project, cheated. Can we put the live stream out? Whoever cheated, when it came to the point to describe the inclusion of young people with fewer opportunity and said, yeah, I think we also have 50, it's good the evaluators like this and we do this and we find them somewhere and so whoever cheated, you don't have to raise your hands, but you know what I mean. You definitely know what I mean when I ask you this question. So, since I'm working for this program, I also started as a project promoter and now I changed the sides a bit. We ask our question, how can young people with few opportunities or inclusion targets group better profit from this program? So what has happened, just the background and a bit. Already in 2007, when the Youth in Action program started, the European Commission launched an inclusion strategy. The the last program period in 2007, 2013, and now remember about this cheating part, the statistics said that 24% of the participants were young people with fewer opportunities. So there's also a list about 7 different disadvantages is listed in this strategy paper, and 24 percent anyway for a program which addresses next to the education programs where students or people who have an education background participate is anyway a low number. It's not a high number, but anyway, how did we come then to this 24%? Remember my questions about your project writing. With the new program in December 2014, there was a revised strategy published, and now it was called Inclusion and Diversity. And you have actually issue, if you never read it or heard about it but never read it, there are issues of the strategy on the table. So there was a slight change, I would say, from inclusion and to also name diversity, because just simply said, inclusion could also mean to include into something existing and also, I don't know, streamline a bit. And inclusion and diversity says, okay, including, but we want including to, we don't want to give up our diversity and diverse society. And now actually for us, as national agencies, a really interesting project started. I mean, you can imagine there are now 33 youth agencies, some of education and youth out in Europe. We always have, they are set up all very differently. I mean, we have a more NGO background, the other have a more civil servant background, I would say. They're really, really different setups, and we always had actually in the youth sector a very good cooperation working with each other. But it needed many years that we not only cooperated like since bringing our program forward, but that we also work together more strategically. Means that we together plan, together develop strategies how to do that. Not like a mix which comes from all over Europe. We do something on inclusion and you do something on inclusion and we send our participants to each other, but to come to a more strategic approach. So the program gives the agencies, I don't know, there's something called the Training and Cooperation Plan, which is set in this Key Action 3, for those who know the program better, gives a possibility to network and cooperate or do cooperation projects with each other. And within this possibility, the agencies create 3 so-called strategic partnerships, and one of these strategic partnerships is on the topic of inclusion. Maybe I put it forward, one outcome of this, and believe me, since I am in Interkulturelles Zentrum, every second teammate meeting, we said, yeah, it would be great if we would have our own inclusion strategy. Nothing happened. Through this, here, it's not printed, it has still many open dots. But this is the inclusion strategy of the Austrian National Agency for Austria. So that means also that was a kick-off that this networking of the agencies, the strategic working together, that now in the countries we all develop our own specific strategies, how we bring young people with fewer opportunities better into our program, how they could better benefit it, how do we reach these target groups. So in this strategic partnership, there actually we said we have 2 aims. So we want to have a strategic approach to engage more youth organizations, to work with young people with fewer opportunities, and also we want to reach out, motivate, train, support, and follow up organizations that have the potential to go international with young people with fewer opportunities. Because there's lots also happening, of course, with this target group on national levels, but going international is, which is our program, it's really like, it's an obstacle also for youth workers to go international with their target, with their kids when they have an inclusion background. I don't know, I use now one of these bad terms. How we want to do this? So we said, first we want to map and have a needs analysis of the organizations dealing with this target group, engaging in capacity building of organizations, working with inclusion target groups, offering space for partner finding and developing project ideas, supporting partnership building and networking for inclusion on all levels and across sectors, mapping of the existing resources, monitoring, dissemination and exploitation of all of these results. You might say, okay, we have heard this before, but what I want to bring forward is, for me, it's really a change in working together of the agencies, so that we define together these goals and that we work as a network to implement this. So who would be our target groups? So we said we would look at organizations experienced in inclusion of young people, but not experienced in international cooperation. Because, as I said, it is for some organizations who work with inclusion target groups, it's a big step to go international, to say, oh, it's already, for me, for a youth worker, or we hear this from teachers as well, it's already so difficult to just to go to the other side of the city. Why should I go with my youngsters to Sweden or to Portugal? I cannot do it. I have not the experience how to do it, and it's going to be a disaster. Another target group would be organizations experienced in international youth work, but not in inclusion. Maybe some of you would say, nah, when you work internationally, we are all experienced in this. Many of us experienced to talk about inclusion. So there are many, many good projects out in the Youth in Action world where we talk about inclusion. If you look at the target groups, it's a very, very small number who actually really is able to participate. 24% we heard in the Youth in Action program. So it's a difference if we talk about it or we include people into youth exchange groups. Another target group would be the informal youth groups, newcomers to the program, and of course stakeholders revolving around inclusion issues. Because I was so proud, I said it already before. So one outcome is that those agencies, and it's many agencies, it's not all agencies, but many who are involved in this strategic partnership. So based on these thoughts, the involved youth agencies work out their own inclusion strategy. And as I said, I brought it here. It's not finished yet, but we are working on this paper and also on and want to implement the strategy in Austria. We set a special focus in Austria, and we set it on because as I said, there are 7 different inclusion targets group named in the inclusion and diversity strategy. And one reason why we never really started to work was that they are so diverse. I mean, we always said, oh my God, that's unemployed young people, and that's migration, and that's disability. And then we never even started to work, because we said it's such a big cosmos, each and every group needs another approach. And can we really do this, and are we really the experts for that? So we thought we put focus, we will change the focus, but we put the focus on the target group cultural differences. It comes at one point out of our background as Interkulturelles Zentrum, but also, of course, of the recent developments, immigrants, refugees, descendants from immigration or refugee families. So this is what will be the focus in the Austrian inclusion strategy, in the Austrian agencies inclusion strategy. I will not talk, because this is maybe the point where I go a bit to the refugee question. So you all know, I mean, so in the face of Charlie Hebdo, in 2015, the Paris Declaration was issued, and now in March 2016, there came, like from the education sector, also response what the education sector can do. So, so promoting citizenship and common values, freedom of tolerance, non-discrimination through education. A paper was issued beginning this year. And in this sense, there was also recently, I talked with a few people here, there was issued a central call by European Commission, a Key Action 3 call, also something very new and new for us as youth agencies of the Erasmus program, because we were invited to send proposals. This is something which is very new for us and also changes the partnership and how we as agencies work together. So the deadline was actually on Monday, and there were 3 projects handed in. The projects focus on human rights education, they focus on youth participation, and they focus on youth worker on training for youth workers on these issues. So I tried to summarize a bit how I see how Erasmus Plus could respond to this. So I already said it a bit. So I think what Youth in Action can do, so we can help to promote democratic values, intercultural understanding of young people in Europe. That is definitely something we do with Youth in Action. What we also can do is that we can support youth workers in their work through the Youth in Action program, maybe easier than the direct target group, because one of the problems is we are an international, an European project, and asylum seekers normally cannot travel so easy through Europe. And since the new program generation, there are absolutely no measures in the program which only are carried out on national level. So it's very hard to include, for example, asylum seekers or new migrants in a mobility program. Also, that's probably not one of their biggest problems they have when they arrive newly as migrants in, for example, in Austria, to go again on a mobility. And the third thing is also that we, of course, can do more promotion of what Youth in Action can offer for this. And last but not least, I already got the red card from the backside because I'm talking too much, like always. But if you want to go in these bus groups, so I am interested in this question: how can Erasmus Plus Youth in Action become a more inclusive program, especially when it comes to the target groups of newly arrived migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers? And my questions are about the accessibility of the program, all about how you get access to the program, about this long and very difficult forms and administrative barriers. Do you think we need to create new formats if we really want them in? Or is this what we can offer in this program? Is this okay? Or can we fit them in? Or do we need new formats? Is it needed to create again possibilities on national levels in the program? And in case of migrants, asylum seekers, I said it's a question of free mobility. We are in a Europe where borders are closed. We are in a Europe where, of course, for mobility, if you're if you're looking for asylum, for example, it's maybe not your first need, but on the way we have also problems to integrate this target group into our projects because they are not free in mobility in Europe. So this would be questions I would ask to you, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Gerhard, for your sharing with us the work you're doing in Austria. I felt a bit ignored at one point, the cards. But thank you. We ran a lot of time into the coffee break, so I would invite you to have these bus groups during the coffee break. And of course, now we are going to have the labs. We are going to be split into labs, and it's going to be the opportunity to go deeper onto the presentations that we've had as a kickoff of discussions.